Yes, good old George Washington. So when we were told to come up with presidents we wanted to talk about, I was reminded of a story we did last week on Quintez Brown, that 21-year-old kid that shot at the mayoral candidate in Louisville. So I did a really long report on Brown. I did a lot of background research on him, and he didn't come across to me like some, thug or degenerate criminal. He was a really thoughtful and bright kid. He was he was running for city council. He was really active in the community. He was doing a lot of social justice stuff, but he seemed to really genuinely care about the people in his community. And he used to be a columnist for the Louisville Courier-Journal, which is a pretty big deal. So, I read through several of his columns in the Courier-Journal, and then I came across, as I'm reading some of these things, I'm like, wow, that's a really good point. That's really thoughtful. There's almost a full article where I was like, oh, we could have ran something like this, talking about, how different laws have impacted the black community and how that's had a huge effect today. Then, I'm reading this article. I'm loving everything he's saying. Everything is just so thoughtful and precise. And then all of a sudden, that thoughtfulness gets thrown out the window as soon as he talks about the founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. And then he says this line, or these few lines: my father grew up during the Reagan administration's war on drugs. My mother, my Nana, grew up during the Johnson administration's war on poverty. I grew up during the Bush administration's war on terror. War has existed in my family for generations. Are we a cursed people? Consider the answer our slave-owning founding fathers would give. Now that tells me, so this bright young kid who ends up, gets really triggered by racial justice stuff, and he gets super radical, then shoots up a Democratic campaign office because he thinks they're not progressive enough. He was indoctrinated into believing that this whole nation is corrupt from its core, that our slave-owning founding fathers. I've heard that phrase way too often, and it really betrays that these people have no idea what they're talking about.
It's the 1619 narrative.
It's 1619, CRT is embedded with these ideas. But if you use the phrase slave-owning founding fathers, and your intent is to say that they're these evil racist people that set up our country to kind of perpetuate slavery, you've never read anything that the founding fathers have written, said, or believed in, or supported when they were alive. And so, yeah, let's just talk about founding fathers. Let's talk about George Washington specifically, what he thought about slavery. So, Washington, Jefferson, all of these guys abhorred slavery. They thought it was, a moral blight on society. They wanted to abolish it. But, it's easy today from our little classrooms where they're teaching us how slavery's evil and everything's wrong. It's easy for us to go, okay, so slavery's bad. The answer is to abolish slavery. That's how it goes. It was not that simple back then.
If you've got a wand.
There was a lot of complicating factors, and the founding fathers, all of them, most of them wanted to end slavery, but none of them wanted to do it immediately. And for, two main reasons. One of them was they feared that a race war would break out, and they considered, slavery to be an evil and race war to be an even bigger evil. And, eventually...
that would have been ethnic cleansing, too, given the population breakdown.
And you saw a little bit of this, when slaves were released in Haiti, back before it was called Haiti. I don't remember what it was called, but there was this big cleansing. And even when we had the Civil War, it was the bloodiest conflict in American history. Came to fruition. It's kind of what they predicted. For every 6 slaves that were free, 1 American died in that war. So, believe it or not, we actually did pay a pretty immense price in order to rid the country of that
literally in blood and treasure.
So they feared that. They thought we need to have a plan. We need to really stage out. We can't just release everyone into the population all at once. We need to set them up with skills so that they don't end up in generational poverty, which also ended up coming true. So the founding fathers, they tried to protect against all of these things, and nobody, a lot of people didn't listen to them. Really, they considered the pro-slavery people to be just as stupid as kind of the all-out 100% abolish slavery people, because neither of them actually wanted what's best for any of the slaves themselves.